He's a stone-cold liar. I respect the presidency. I've tried to have an open hand with him, tried to work with him. You can't work with Donald Trump. You can only work for him. And I will not. I refuse to work for Donald Trump.
California Governor Gavin Newsom is now calling his city's homeless encampments unacceptable, which is odd since he's the guy who, made them acceptable. Turning sidewalks into red carpet events for drug addicts, thieves, and unemployed CNN.
I barely survived this chaos, and it had nothing to do with a tough workout or spicy food. This was a front row seat to politics flipping upside down right in front of me. Gavin Newsom walked in ready for another round of polished speeches and perfect smiles. Then Greg Gutfeld stormed in like a comedy wrecking ball with zero warning. What happened after wasn't a debate. It was a slow, painful collapse of confidence, control, and public dignity, and every second was impossible to look away from.
If you've been watching this show, and I know you have, we were the first to call out Gavin's bizarre hand movements. Remember this classic?
Conditions that determine our fate and future. And that fundamental notion of agency, I think, is important more broadly. And I think that goes to some of the issues around, victimization. And I see a lot of that, respectively, on the right, increasingly, even with Trump often approaching things from that sort of mindset.
Then even Trump couldn't help it.
Before we go any further, hit that like button and subscribe because you already know this is one moment you do not want to miss. The room barely had time to settle before the tension shot straight up as one polished political smile crashed into a late-night grin sharp enough to cut the air. An unspoken warning hit everyone at once. This was never going to stay polite.
I'd be lying, and I can't do that. Well, since you can't lie, what tequila were you nursing while the Pacific Palisades burned? And what was it like banging your campaign manager's wife? Of course, he's just waiting for us to forget that his state looks like an overturned porta potty. But with fake crime statistics and fake boobs, why not have a fake governor? In an interview last week, Newsom painted himself as a latchkey kid struggling to make ends meet.
It was also about paying the bills, man. And it was just like...
Gavin walked in with that familiar governor-level confidence, the kind that acts like bright lights, cameras, and applause are already his. Greg Gutfeld came in right after, looking like a man who'd just been given permission to cause trouble, with one mischievous smile.
So Newsom is fed up with tent cities, the crime, the urban decay? No, he's not mad about that stuff. He's mad you noticed. It's like a criminal telling a jury he's sorry he robbed 25 banks when he's just sorry he got caught on the 26th. Because this isn't some spontaneous crisis. It's a man-made disaster like Chernobyl or Fox and Friends. The man who made it acts like he had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
It's pure government grift, shoving you down a flight of stairs and then making you pay for the handrail.
At first, everything moved with the slow, calm pace of polite conversation, and Newsom's posture showed off that practiced authority with every breath. It was the kind of confidence built from years of predictable press conferences where the questions feel scripted and any real pushback is nothing more than decoration.
He's pretending that he's like this scrappy underdog, but he really is an elite overdog that hasn't done anything of any difference or value for California, so he has to pick fights. I mean, think about the response to the Palisades fire. Like, nothing has happened. That's on his watch. There's the exodus of people leaving California. There's the taxes, like you say, there's corruption. And I think he's trying to say, look, I can have fun and spar with podcasters.
The energy stayed calm, controlled, almost too perfect. Like the quiet opening of a disaster movie where the sky is still bright and no one has noticed the warnings yet. Then the shift happened and Gutfeld didn't hurry it. He let the moment breathe, letting comfort creep in slowly, like a familiar routine settling in.
Earlier this week, Gavin unleashed his inner 10-fingered freak.
I came into that recall campaign still arguing that all politics is local. I still had a romantic notion of that. I intellectualized that a lot of our politics and the discourse was national. I didn't fully appreciate how nationalized our politics have become. In so many ways, that shape-shifted a lot of what we're doing and who I am today. But this last year, these last 6-7 months, this is something altogether different.
Ugh, it's like he's molesting a goat.
It was the kind of comfort that quietly lowers your guard, the feeling that tricks you into thinking everything is safe and predictable right before it isn't. Gutfeld kept his smile casual and his tone relaxed, and then he threw the first soft dart. subtle enough to seem harmless but sharp enough to test the waters. Newsom brushed it off with a polished deflection, the political version of straightening a tie before stepping back into the spotlight, trying to reclaim control. But Gutfeld doesn't stop at one dart. He builds a whole dartboard out of your own talking points and starts scoring with your biggest hits. The second jab carried real heat. Suddenly, the conversation drifted out of scripted comfort and into harsh daylight that exposes every carefully placed shadow. Gavin's expression shifted just a fraction, barely noticeable, but anyone who watches politicians could see their script burning backstage. Gutfeld kept layering observations calmly, peeling back each layer like a slow, deliberate unwrapping that revealed contradictions, recycled promises, and statements that hadn't aged well at all. The audience hadn't erupted yet. They leaned in, held in that dangerous quiet when everyone knows the balance is about to tip.
So like the fires, Newsom let homelessness run wild. He allowed tens of billions of dollars to be swallowed up by a maze of consultants, nonprofits, and bureaucrats who created poop mats. It's sad. Californians used to sell maps of celebrity homes, not landmines. Now, instead of sightseeing, tourists play hopscotch so their shoes don't get hepatitis. And when residents complain, they're called cruel. And now we're supposed to believe
Newsom kept nodding, the universal move of someone pretending they're still in control while the car is already rolling downhill with no brakes. His answers tightened, the glossy polish thinning just enough to reveal stress cracks underneath. The rhythm he relies on, question, pivot, uplifting line, kept tripping mid-step, like trying to dance while the floor keeps shifting beneath you. There's always a point in a public unraveling when the person on stage stops worrying about impressing the audience and starts thinking about survival. That moment hit like glass shattering in a silent restaurant. Gutfeld wasn't wildly swinging, he was fencing with precision. Suddenly, Newsom looked like he was holding a foam sword against a real blade. The audience reacted in waves, first small bursts of laughter that slipped out when something landed too cleanly, then louder, longer reactions as the hits kept coming. The room wasn't hostile, it was entertained. And that difference is brutal, because being laughed at is far more unsettling than being fiercely argued with. Newsom tried to push back with the full weight of his office, leaning on his record and years of rehearsed talking points. But every attempt to regain control only exposed a fresh weak spot. Gutfeld let him speak just long enough to build a tower of confident phrases, then calmly pulled a key block from the bottom and watched the structure wobble.
A nice story, except that it's about as flimsy as the drawstring on J.B. Pritzker's moo-moo. Because while Gavin was hustling, he was featured in a Children of the Rich article, detailing his ties to billionaire oil man Gordon Getty. His dad worked for the Gettys, and the same Getty fortune bankrolled Gav's first business venture, a winery. This guy owned a wine shop at 24 years old, back when yours truly was still doing nude modeling to pay for alcohol.
This was the moment when the energy stopped feeling competitive and started feeling explosive. Newsom's tone rose, not in volume, but in sharp intensity that cut through the room. His words sped up, edges tightening, and his face carried that unmistakable look of someone who suddenly realizes they've stepped into a debate they thought they'd already won in their head. The eruption wasn't a scream, it was a rush of defensive momentum spilling out faster than he could control. Gutfeld simply watched it unfold, like a man studying a fire burn itself out. He didn't interrupt, overpower, or rush. He let the moment run until it ran out of oxygen. When Newsom finally paused, caught between breaths and halfway through a retort, Greg stepped back into the conversation as if nothing dramatic had happened, wearing the same relaxed posture and the same grin that now felt far more dangerous than before. The contrast said it all. One man battling pressure, the other clearly entertained by it. The more Newsom leaned into authority, the more the conversation drifted into satire, his serious lines landing like unintentional punchlines. Gutfeld didn't need to exaggerate. Reality did it for him. Another redirect from Newsom, another attempt to regain footing, another polished defense, and another effortless checkmate from Gutfeld, delivered through implication rather than volume. That's when the audience shifted from amused to delighted, reacting louder and faster, almost anticipating every move that followed.
But apparently, our commentary on his hands have gotten inside his head, and Gavin now is desperately trying to control himself, and or not.
Well, It's a curious question. I made the entire point that crime's an issue and we want to tackle it, and we continue to do more in that space, and we announced in
Poor guy. I want you to watch again as his errant thumb valiantly, violently resists.
Every pause now felt like a drum roll as Newsom struggled to hold the floor while the ground kept sliding out from under him. Every long answer risked setting up another hit, and every sincere explanation carried the faint echo of a punchline waiting to land. His eruption didn't look chaotic, it tightened everything. Jaw, eyes, and posture, turning polished confidence into something rigid and fragile. The smooth exterior that usually absorbed criticism began bouncing it inward, exposing strain he could no longer hide. Gutfeld shifted gears effortlessly, widening the frame and turning the moment into commentary on the bigger picture, highlighting how Newsom embodied grand language and sweeping promises meant to rise above the mess. He let those lofty ideas float up and then casually pointed out how far removed they were from reality. That clean observation drew the strongest reaction of the night. Not loud, not cruel, but precise. The kind of truth that lands with a thud of inevitability. The audience didn't erupt, they settled in, with the sound of recognition when something fits too perfectly to ignore. From that moment on, every answer Newsom gave carried the weight of being seen through a sharper lens, and he felt it.
So why do I keep bringing up Gavin? Well, other than my respect for his work in American Psycho, he's starting to distance himself from his party's worst ideas. Newsom, a guy who hates fossil fuels but could still bring down the price of gas by wringing out his hair, once proclaimed that his state would be a sanctuary to all who seek it. Then people actually came, tons of them, moving faster than a mob of Walgreens shoppers.
Every attempt Newsom made to reclaim authority now rang strangely, as if the confidence behind his words had lost its footing and couldn't find solid ground again. The eruption had already peaked, leaving a restless, unsettled energy clinging to every gesture he made. His body language began telling the story more clearly than his talking points. The once relaxed governor leaned forward too often, signaling urgency, while his hands moved with a tension that revealed just how cornered he felt. His eyes tracked the exchange with a sharpness that exposed how little space he believed he still had. This wasn't a man enjoying a debate, it was a man fighting to steady a narrative slipping sideways. Meanwhile, Gutfeld leaned back, not out of arrogance, but comfort, creating a contrast so sharp it felt cinematic. When he joked, it landed perfectly. When he commented, it slid into place with flawless timing. Even Newsom's strongest points came out strained, as if forced uphill, while Gutfeld's replies rolled downhill with ease and speed. The eruption hadn't disappeared. It had transformed into a controlled burn, still hot, but contained. Newsom spoke more cautiously now, but caution had arrived too late. The earlier flare-up had already shaped how everything would be received. The audience listened differently, skepticism sharpened by the laughter that had come before.
All the problems of the last decade were based on his and his party's lies. A man can grow his hair out and play girls' sports. A gangbanger can claim he's oppressed. That homeless junkie, he's just an out-of-work artist. See, Newsom wasn't just ignoring the problem, he enabled it because Dems were in a woke crouch, terrified of their loony base. But now that he's seeing the White House, he's got a brand new act, a common-sense centrist. Just a soccer dad in khakis, fed up with crime and chaos. It's all bull. A costume, a political drag show, and the kids this drag queen is reading to are the
Gutfeld circled back, not to repeat himself, but to reshape everything that had already been said into a sharper, clearer form, like sliding chess pieces into a final position that suddenly makes the whole board make sense. He didn't need a dramatic closing line. The exchange had already told its own story, unmistakable and unavoidable. Newsom responded with dignity, credit where it's due, refusing to slip into exaggerated outrage, steadying himself, and pushing forward with whatever rhythm he could still command. But that rhythm was permanently altered. The earlier eruption wasn't the finale, it was the turning point. Every sentence afterward carried the aftershock of that moment. What made the scene hit so hard wasn't just that Newsom felt pressured, it was that he knew the audience saw it in real time. And that awareness is a true disruptor for any politician trained to handle tension. Gutfeld widened the frame again, giving Newsom space to speak, then gently nudging that space just enough to reshape it without force. It wasn't dominance through aggression, it was dominance through tone, quiet and subtle, working from beneath. By the final stretch, the eruption had cooled into something calmer but far more revealing, a mix of persistence and resignation, as Newsom fought on from containment rather than command. No longer trying to conquer the narrative, but trying to manage the tremors left behind.
So last week, Newsom said he hopes the conservative Supreme Court will overturn the current law that bans his state from removing out-of-control homeless encampments. Imagine that. Well, what did you expect, Gavin? That the sanctuary seekers were going to show up in Winnebagos? Once again, another example of a high-profile lib using his big mouth to write a check his ass can't cash. Last year, after the Texas Governor Abbott ordered that parents of transitioning children should face criminal investigation, Newsom then tweeted this: "Trans kids and their families should be celebrated."
The audience felt the shift immediately, and the reaction softened into a steadier rhythm as the spectacle transformed into something quieter and more reflective. The dramatic blow-up everyone expected had already happened, not in one big explosion, but through a series of precise moments that slowly tilted the ground beneath Gavin's feet. Gutfeld stayed relaxed, making his final moves almost gentle, because there was no need for a knockout when the scorecards were already in his favor. His closing remarks didn't spike, they settled, and that calmness became the loudest message of the night. Newsom handled the ending with composure, straightening himself and trying to rebuild the posture he arrived with, but the residue of the clash lingered. The slight pauses before he answered and the small delays that felt like echoes of everything that had unfolded. It was like the aftermath of a storm everyone pretended was only light rain, even though the air carried that unmistakable clarity that comes after something powerful has reshaped the landscape. No debris on stage, no dramatic wreckage, just the quiet realization that the room had been rearranged in a way no one could unsee. What made the moment last wasn't volume or chaos, it was the inversion, the way timing and tone clipped titles and resumes, showing exactly who controlled the room and who suddenly had to negotiate for it.
He wasn't even one of those poor kids. Hell, poor kids don't have pet otters like Gavin did. Gavin actually had a pet otter, which also means he had pet fish to feed said otter. But he's lucky he started from privilege. He never had a real job. And once he gained power, he counts on Wikipedia editors to make him working class. And then you count on nobody bothering to look it all up, which is a bad strategy in this day of Grok and ChatGPT and a public who no longer believes anything coming.
Gutfeld walked in as the night's entertainment, but he left as the center of gravity, pulling the entire room into his orbit without ever forcing it. Somewhere between those two moments, the eruption stopped being about anger and became pure exposure. The kind that doesn't scorch in a single flash, but lingers warmly in the audience's memory long after the cameras turn off. Everyone knew the exact second the balance tipped because they felt it happen in real time, right in their seats. The conversation didn't end when the camera stopped rolling. It simply moved into new spaces, green rooms, comment sections, and every corner of the internet where people replayed each frame like detectives, searching for micro-expressions and subtle clues. The eruption became a slow-burn meme cycle, spreading piece by piece. Newsom's team reacted quickly, leaning on the familiar language of confidence and calm, the Virgil equivalent of smoothing wrinkles from a suit to make everything appear untouched. Their message was clear. Nothing unusual happened, just a spirited debate. But the harder that narrative tried to settle, the more the visuals pushed back. Because the internet doesn't forget posture, timing, or the exact instant when a rhythm breaks under pressure. It remembers everything.
So last week, when a California law was proposed that judges in custody cases favor the parent who supports transitioning a child's new gender, Newsom killed that law quicker than a late-term abortion. Yeah, I know, huh? Now the left, being the left, was outraged, but they missed something, because now Newsom says he only vetoed it since it's already the law. That's a nice one, dude. You gotta admit, this guy's so oily, he should join OPEC. But what a magician. Only he pulls excuses out of his butt instead of rap.
Gutfeld didn't need to strut or celebrate once the moment ended. The silence alone made the impact sharper, because silence can be thunderous when everyone else is scrambling to explain their version of events. His advantage lingered, not because he talked about it, but because he didn't. The exchange stood on its own, like a still frame that replays in your mind long after the scene is over. What unsettled people most was how ordinary everything looked on the surface, the kind of subtle disruption that rattles polished institutions far more than loud chaos ever could. A storm is easy to prepare for, but you can't rehearse for a shift in gravity. Gavin's eruption, in hindsight, felt less like anger and more like a visible crack in a carefully maintained rhythm. Honey man, rhythm, even grown man. Once a crack appears, even if it's patched, everyone knows exactly where to look next time. Long after the laughs fade and the clips stop trending, the exchange remains a blueprint for how fast control can flip when comfort meets perfect timing. No scandal, no dramatic exit, just the unmistakable realization of who truly owned the room and who suddenly had to fight to keep their footing.